When Thomas placed his hand on mine that evening, the world outside our porch felt still, like even the wind was holding its breath. I remember the porch light flickering against his face, the way he smiled, tired but soft, and told me I was his only one. I believed him. I always did. For 15 years, Thomas was my home, steady, kind, and patient in ways that made other women at church say I was lucky. We lived in a small town tucked between the mountains, where people still waved to each other at stop signs, and gossip spread faster than the morning paper. I taught literature at the local high school, and Thomas was a paramedic, the man everyone trusted in an emergency. We didn't have much, but we had enough, and somehow that felt sacred. When I found out I was pregnant, it felt like the world had decided to give me a second sunrise. Thomas cried when I told him. He held my belly every night, whispering to the baby, "Your daddy's right here." And maybe that's why what happened later cut so deep. Because the man who held my hand in the delivery room, who told me to breathe and pushed my hair off my sweaty forehead, was the same man whose lies were waiting just outside that door. The day of our daughter's birth was calm at first. The hospital smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Nurses moved quietly, their shoes squeaking against polished floors. I remember watching Thomas adjust his gloves. He was on shift that day, helping with emergency deliveries, and I laughed, saying, "You can't be both the husband and the medic." He just smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Today I'm whatever you need me to be." Hours passed in a blur of contractions and muffled voices until I heard our baby's first cry, that thin, perfect sound that made everything else fade away. I was crying too, reaching out for her, when Thomas looked at me with a face I couldn't read. For a second, his eyes darted toward the door. I thought maybe he was calling for another nurse. But then there was a knock, soft, hesitant. He froze. The room was quiet except for the baby's tiny breathing. I remember saying, "Tom, who is that?" And the way he whispered, "No, not now," made something in me go cold. The nurse opened the door before he could stop her, and there she was, a woman standing there with eyes full of something between confusion and anger. Her voice trembled when she said, "Where's my husband?" I swear the world went silent. Even the beeping monitor seemed to pause. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't even turn around right away. The woman took a step forward. She was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back like she'd been crying for hours. "Thomas," she said again, "you said you were working." My body felt numb. Every sound came through like it was underwater. "Who are you?" I asked her, but my voice didn't sound like mine. She looked at me, then at the baby in my arms, and her lip trembled. "I'm his wife," she whispered. Thomas finally turned, his hands shaking. "Evelyn, please," he said. Her name rolled off his tongue too easily, too familiar. The nurse gasped. Someone dropped a tray. My baby whimpered, and for a second I thought I might faint. The truth wasn't just falling apart. It was unraveling right there in front of me, one heartbeat at a time. The woman's words kept echoing in my head. "I'm his wife." I stared at Thomas, the man who'd built a crib with his bare hands, who'd painted the nursery yellow because he said pink was too expected. My husband. My only one. "Tell me she's lying," I said, my voice barely holding together. But he didn't. He just looked at me, tears filling his eyes, and whispered, "I'm sorry." That was the moment the room changed for me. Not the pain, not the exhaustion, not even the betrayal itself, but the realization that the life I thought was mine had someone else living inside it too. And as the nurse took my baby gently from my arms to calm her, I felt something inside me break, not loudly but quietly, like the sound of glass cracking under pressure, the kind of break that no one hears until it's too late. Later, I learned that Evelyn had been married to him for almost 4 years. 4 years. Overlapping every birthday, every anniversary, every whispered, "I love you." She'd found out about me by accident. A hospital record. A delivery notice with his name on it. She came because she needed to see if it was real. I couldn't blame her for that. I would have done the same. But standing there, weak and stitched, with the taste of betrayal still bitter in my mouth, I realized that forgiveness wasn't even an option yet. The only thing I could feel was the silence, thick, suffocating, endless. I didn't sleep that night. The hospital room was too quiet, too bright, and every sound, the hum of the air conditioner, the faint beeping of monitors, felt like a reminder that my life had split in two. Thomas was gone before sunrise. He didn't say goodbye, didn't touch the baby again, didn't even look back. The nurse told me he'd been called away on an emergency, but I knew better. I could feel the truth in the air, heavy, sour, unspoken. The nurses moved around me softly after that, like I was made of glass. One of them, an older woman named Linda, sat with me for a while, holding my hand. "Honey," she said, her voice low and kind, "some truths break us before they set us free." I wanted to believe that, but all I felt was broken. The days that followed were a blur of visitors I couldn't bear to see, sympathy I couldn't stand to hear. My mother came from 2 towns over, bringing casseroles and questions I didn't want to answer. When she asked where Thomas was, I said, "He's working." The lie came out easily, almost naturally, maybe because I wasn't ready to say the truth out loud. Naming it made it real, and real hurt too much. When I finally went home, the house looked the same, the yellow nursery, the framed photos, his coffee mug still on the counter. Everything was still there except him. I remember standing in the doorway, holding our daughter, staring at the couch where he used to fall asleep watching the news. It was strange how betrayal could make a home feel haunted, even when it wasn't. I spent those first few nights pacing the nursery, humming lullabies to a baby who didn't understand that her father had lied to both of us. Sometimes I caught myself whispering to her, "You'll never have to wonder if you're enough." 2 weeks later, he came back. I saw his car from the window before I heard the knock. I wanted to pretend I wasn't home, but part of me needed to see his face again, needed to know what kind of man could build 2 families and call them both love. When I opened the door, he looked smaller somehow, like guilt had shrunk him. His hair was messy, his eyes red-rimmed, and in his hands he held a box of baby clothes. "I didn't know what else to do," he said softly. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I laughed, not the kind that comes from humor, but the kind that bursts out when pain has nowhere else to go. "You didn't mean to marry 2 women," I said. "You didn't mean to lie every day for 4 years?" He tried to step closer, but I moved back. I could smell the same cologne he always wore, cedar and something sweet. It made my stomach twist. "Please, just let me explain," he said. His voice cracked when he looked at our daughter in my arms. "I love her. I love you both. I got caught in something I couldn't control." That sentence, "I got caught," told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry for being found out. I told him to leave, and when he hesitated, I pointed toward the street. "Go home," I said quietly. "Whichever one that is." He stood there for a moment, his jaw tight, then finally nodded. "You're right," he said. "You deserve better than this." And then he was gone again. But the story didn't end there, not yet. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Evelyn. The envelope was thin, the handwriting careful and nervous. Inside, she wrote that she was sorry for coming to the hospital, that she hadn't known I was giving birth that day. She said she'd discovered his second phone, the hidden credit card statements, the quiet weekends he claimed to be on call. "He told me about you once," she wrote. "He said you were someone he used to love, someone he'd let go of years ago. I didn't know I was living in your shadow, or that you were still living in his lie." I read that letter 3 times, my hands trembling, my heart caught between pity and rage. I realized then that she wasn't my enemy. She was just another woman who'd been told the same beautiful lies. And that realization, as bitter as it was, felt like the first breath after drowning. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. We were both victims of the same man's need to be adored twice. That night, I stood in the nursery again, watching the moonlight fall across the crib. My daughter stirred in her sleep, one tiny fist clenched like she was holding on to something only she understood. I whispered to her, "One day, I'll tell you everything, not so you'll hate him, but so you'll understand what love should never look like." The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. For me, for her, and for Evelyn too. I called Evelyn the next morning. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone when she answered. Her voice was soft, uncertain, the kind of voice you use when you don't know if the person on the other end wants to scream or cry. "This is Margaret," I said quietly. "Thomas's wife." There was a pause so long that I thought she might hang up, but then she whispered, "I know. I've been waiting for your call." We met later that afternoon at a small cafe just outside town, one of those quiet places where the coffee's always warm and the waitresses don't ask questions. I got there first. I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, feeling like the world outside was trying to wash something away. When Evelyn walked in, I recognized her immediately. She wasn't what I expected. She was younger than me by maybe 5 years. Elegant in a quiet way, no makeup, just tired eyes and a wedding ring that matched my own. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, two strangers tied together by one man's lies. When she finally sat down, she said, "I'm sorry." I wanted to be angry, but there was something so sincere in her voice that the words caught in my throat. "I didn't know about you," she continued. "Not until that day at the hospital. I thought I was the only one." I stared at the coffee cup between us, steam curling like a ghost between our hands. "So did I said. We talked for hours about how we met him, how he made us feel special, how he used the same phrases, the same stories, the same lies. Every detail lined up too perfectly. He'd built 2 lives with precision, 2 homes, 2 routines, even 2 sets of wedding vows. I remember Evelyn saying he wasn't just living a double life. He was rehearsing one love with another. There was pain, yes, but also a strange kind of relief in sharing it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the fool I'd started to believe I was. We were both deceived. And by the end of that conversation, I knew I didn't want revenge, not the kind that burned. I wanted truth. The kind that exposed, that healed, that freed us both. So we made a plan, not to destroy him, but to confront him together. Evelyn still lived in their house, or rather one of his houses, and she invited me there the following Sunday. "He'll be home from work by 6, she said. "He won't expect you." I remember thinking how strange it was that we were plotting this like a quiet war, 2 wives preparing to stand side by side against the man who had promised them both forever. That Sunday, I dressed simply, a dark blouse, no makeup, my hair pulled back. I didn't want to look like the woman he had charmed. I wanted to look like the woman he couldn't fool anymore. I arrived just before 6. Evelyn met me at the door, her hands trembling as she opened it. The house was beautiful, too beautiful. Polished floors, white curtains, the faint scent of vanilla candles. It looked like the mirror image of my own home, down to the same brand of coffee on the counter. It made me sick. We didn't have to wait long. When his car pulled into the driveway, my heart started pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Evelyn's hand found mine. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we tell the truth." I nodded. The front door opened, and Thomas stepped in, whistling softly like it was just another evening. He froze when he saw me standing there. For a moment, nobody spoke. His face went pale, his mouth half open like he couldn't decide what to say first. "Margaret," he stammered. What are you doing here?" Evelyn's voice was calm but steady. "She's here because she has every right to be." He looked between us, eyes darting, searching for a way out. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I took a step closer, my voice low and steady. "You're right. It wasn't. But here we are." Evelyn crossed her arms. "How long, Thomas? How long were you going to keep it up?" He started to speak, but I cut him off. "Save it. We already know." I pulled the letter from my bag, the one she had written to me, and placed it on the table. "We know everything." He sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said. "I thought I could keep both of you safe." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. Evelyn laughed bitterly. "You didn't keep us safe, Thomas. You kept us blind." For the first time, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity, like fog lifting after a long storm. I told him I wanted a divorce. Evelyn said she did too. And in that moment, we weren't rivals anymore. We were survivors. 2 women who'd been lied to, standing together in the ruins of his deceit. He didn't fight it. Maybe because he knew he'd already lost. Not just his wives, but his illusion of control. When I left that night, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth was already enough punishment. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, like my life had been emptied of noise, but not peace yet. I moved out of the house Thomas and I had shared, and into a small apartment closer to my daughter's school. The first few nights were the hardest. Every time I heard the creak of the old radiator or the hum of a passing car, I expected to hear his voice, the familiar weight of lies wrapped in tenderness. But silence, I learned, can be its own kind of healing. My daughter Lily was only 6. She didn't understand everything, but she was perceptive, far too perceptive for her age. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Mommy, are we not going home?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and brushed her hair back gently. "This is home, sweetheart," I said. "Anywhere we're safe, anywhere we're honest, that's home." She nodded like she understood, but I could tell her little heart still missed the comfort of what we'd lost. Meanwhile, Thomas's life began to crumble in slow motion. Word spread as it always does in small towns. His colleagues whispered behind his back. His reputation at the hospital took a hit. He had been admired once, Dr. Thomas Wells, the dependable family man. Now he was just the man who lived 2 lives and lost them both. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall, but I won't lie. There was a quiet justice in watching truth do what revenge could not. Evelyn and I kept in touch. At first, it was practical. Updates about lawyers, documents, shared exhaustion. But over time, something unexpected grew between us. Not friendship, exactly. Something deeper, understanding. We had both loved the same man, believed the same promises, and survived the same betrayal. That kind of bond doesn't fade easily. One afternoon, she called me out of the blue. "I saw him," she said, "at the grocery store. He looked small, like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. I didn't respond right away. I didn't want to admit it, but a part of me still pictured him every time I passed the hospital. "He made his choices," I finally said, "and now he's living with them." There was a long pause, and then she said, "Do you ever miss him?" I thought about it. About the mornings when he'd bring me coffee, the way he used to hum while fixing the fence, the smile that felt like sunlight before I knew what it hid. "I miss the man I thought he was," I said quietly, "but not the man he turned out to be." Months passed. Life began to take shape again. I started working part-time at the library, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Lily thrived. She started drawing again, filling pages with little suns and hearts and stick figure families that still somehow had 3 people. When she showed me one of her drawings, she said, "That's you, me, and Grandma. We don't need anyone else." I smiled, though my eyes stung with tears. One evening, as I was closing up the library, I found an old poetry book on the return cart. The page was folded at a verse that read, "The truth does not break you. It unmasks you, and what's left is what was always meant to survive." I don't know who left it there, but it felt like a message, like the universe reminding me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering who you were before the lie. About a year later, Evelyn invited me and Lily to her daughter's birthday party. I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure if revisiting that part of my life was wise, but something in me wanted to go. When we arrived, the backyard was full of laughter and music. Children ran through sprinklers, parents chatted over lemonade, and for the first time, I saw Evelyn smiling, really smiling. When she saw me, she came over and hugged me tight. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I replied, for the first time in a long while. We sat together under a maple tree, watching the kids play, and I realized how far we'd come, from the shock and rage of that night to this quiet, sunlit peace. As the sun began to set, I saw Thomas standing at the edge of the yard. He looked hesitant, older, worn down. He wasn't part of our lives anymore, but Evelyn had invited him for the sake of their children. Our eyes met for a brief moment. There was no anger left, no bitterness, just the faint recognition of 2 people who had finally stopped pretending. He gave a small nod, and I returned it. Then I turned back to my daughter, who was chasing bubbles with the other kids, her laughter ringing through the golden air. That sound, her laughter, was my closure, my peace, my proof that love can survive truth, even when marriage cannot. That night after the party, when Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat and the road home was quiet, I rolled down the window and let the cool wind brush against my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from memories. I wasn't haunted by what-ifs or half-truths. I was simply there, breathing, healing, free. When we reached home, I tucked Lily into bed and stood by the window for a long time, watching the moonlight spill across the floor. It struck me how peaceful everything looked. No more lies, no more pretending, just the stillness of a life rebuilt from the wreckage of deception. And for once, that stillness didn't scare me. The truth is, betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your reflection. You stop recognizing the person you became while trying to hold together something that was never whole. But little by little, you begin to see yourself again, not as a victim, not as a fool, but as someone who chose honesty over illusion, peace over chaos. I still keep that poetry book on my nightstand, the one that said, "The truth unmasks you." Some nights, I open it and read the verse again, tracing the faded ink with my fingers. It reminds me that the hardest truths often lead to the most honest versions of ourselves. As for Thomas, I don't know where he is now. Maybe he's still trying to rebuild. Maybe he's found someone new. Or maybe he's still learning what love really means when it isn't built on lies. I don't wish him harm. In a strange way, I wish him peace, because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself move on. And so, every morning when I make my coffee and watch the sunrise through my kitchen window, I whisper a quiet thank you, not to him, but to the version of me that chose to stay when everything fell apart. The woman who walked through fire and came out gentler, wiser, freer. Because the truth didn't ruin my life. It rebuilt it.